are so fast, it has been an organic rush to fund this nominee. The Zooms you see have raised a lot of money. Trump raised, by comparison, about $137 million last month. Today's new monthly report shows Harris doubling that haul with a record $310 million. And remember, you see the July there on the headline, and this is for all of July, but Harris only formally entered the race in the last 10 days of that month, when most of that big haul came in. July was also supposed to be the RNC's big moment. Conventions often draw wider interest and donations, plus Trump tapped his new running mate this month. But apparently Vance, Hulk, and other prominent voices at the RNC could not keep up with Harris. Now, while no one is saying that the Trump campaign overly fundraised off the tragic events around his attempted assassination, that was also something that in politics was, in the days after, a big unifying moment for the Republicans. And, like I showed you, they raised some money, but nothing like Harris. Her haul also includes 2 million first-time donors, an echo of Bernie Sanders' online superpowers at fundraising. Those are new Democratic donors who can legally give again every week or month if they want, because about 9 out of 10 donations were far under the legal max, under $200 in the case of what you see from Harris. And that means she can go back to those people again and again through November. Now, in modern politics, campaigns tend to measure support starting with a kind of inner core, the donors, the volunteers, and these engaged online activists who carry a campaign's message, who show up to events, who literally power it. And then the ultimate outer layer is just your base voters. We hear so much about the base, right? Those people may not show up at a big rally like what Harris held in Atlanta, but they do tend to vote in presidential years. Then there's the persuadable voters, and then those sporadic or less engaged people we hear about. We don't even call them voters because they often aren't. They may or may not vote at all this November. They are the people that you hear about sometimes cast as double haters or people saying, I don't have a reason to vote. And this matters now because, again, over these days, we're getting more information, more evidence. And Harris's campaign is seeing a surge of the core groups I mentioned, that inner core, including excited young people who are dancing their way into viral moments and people noticing them. And they can not only upend this year's electorate by joining it, right, especially if they're of an age where this would be the first election they vote in, they can also be powerful messengers online and in the field. And that brings us to something I want to break down for you tonight before I bring in some great experts. Democrats, as we end the week, are clearly now seeing it as a real possibility that they could bring back an Obama-level enthusiasm here on a faster timeline than Obama had. And that's a marked contrast from the party's very open concerns last month over Joe Biden and what had been a lot of indicators even before the debate that they didn't have that level of enthusiasm. Harris is also diving in and networking with pre-existing groups. Some of them are not traditionally only political, but they may involve overlapping interests, like women's rights or female empowerment. Taylor Swift Swifties has a group now, Swifties for Harris, that's gained over 100,000 followers on social media, much of that organic. It just launched as a thing people can join last week. I've told you before about the Bayhive in other contexts. That's the very passionate group of Beyonce fans in this country and around the world. They are noticing Beyonce signing off on Harris using freedom in her very first video. And as I showed you earlier this week, these two strong women who've done a lot of different things and broken barriers have a pre-existing relationship, not a pre-existing condition like Obamacare era, a pre-existing, long-standing public alliance. So if you're a Beyonce fan, you might already know about that overlap. Now, it's far too early to tell if this kind of stuff that I'm mentioning and that Democrats are counting up means they will be winning back states in November. The first 2 weeks here do suggest, though, that you have some of the diverse and young coalition that launched Obama to the White House. And this idea or goal of rebuilding the Obama coalition, remember, this is not some secret strategy. Obama was the Democrats' last two-term president, and he was more successful than President Carter before him, and he had wider margins of victory than President Clinton before him. So any Democrat thinking about anything is going to say, sure, I'd like to be like Obama. One difference here, though, is Harris seems poised to do it better. She is also a Democrat who has been in these trenches. And I want to point that out to you here. For example, she's talked up that goal in 2019 during her primary presidential campaign.
We need someone on that stage who has the ability to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and someone who has the ability to rebuild the Obama coalition and bring the party and the nation together. I believe I am that candidate.
Many Democratic voters agreed on that goal, rebuild the coalition. They did not agree with her that she was that candidate in that moment. I showed you that clip there from 2019. Indeed, it was Obama's own vice president, who had almost been fully counted out of that race after losing Iowa and New Hampshire, that the Democratic Party turned to. And the big reason we know Veep stakes matter as we think about Harris announcing as soon as next week, well, once you pick a VP, they are in that very key driver's seat. And it is now Biden's VP trying to finish this relay race. Now, you saw some of that grassroots energy I mentioned, from the donors to the young people, but that's one piece of it, and you can't do an Obama coalition without the members of the coalition. That's what you ultimately hope to build in a campaign. And the Trump effort is trying to rebuild what was their coalition the year that they won the Electoral College. So we know about that. But who's doing the building? Well, that brings us to more news tonight. The Harris campaign just brought on Obama's famous architect for his victory, former campaign manager David Plouffe. Now, he is one of the Democratic Party's most successful and respected strategists, author of The Audacity to Win, which tells that story. He is kind of one of the key visionaries then and now of the Obama network, which is still the most sort of popular, widespread, victorious element of the Democratic Party. And again, it bears repeating, even if it seems obvious, Biden is a product of that Obama network and that coalition. Now, many had, of course, also sought after Plouffe as an expert and speaker on politics, including, we should note, across MSNBC in this and other election years. And these are the headlines. Harris building out the campaign specifically with Plouffe and these Obama aides. That's how the Times put it. And the White House communications director from the Obama era, Jennifer Palmieri. The campaign is also trying to do two things at once. They're emphasizing today, and we've seen this in their statements, that they're keeping all the Biden campaign leadership intact. They say they're going to be basically adding, not subtracting. Now, Harris made a point of attending that cold 2007 rally when Obama first launched his presidential bid. And remember, it was a big deal, but he was seen as a challenger to the more likely famous Democratic Party name, the semi-incumbent of Hillary Clinton. You can see a photo also that Harris took there that's from the Facebook with the Obamas. Now, that was an event in Illinois where this year's Democratic Convention is being held, and Harris also hit the Iowa caucus for Obama and later recounted the organizing, the field work, and the weather in that effort.
I remember being in Iowa, Des Moines. It was really, really cold. Christmas through New Year's, and everybody was there. You know, us Californians, we didn't really know what to wear, so we just layered. The president we just celebrated his first 100 days, and we couldn't be more proud because it was the most work that any elected president of the United States in recent memory has actually accomplished. Not just talk, but accomplished. From his first days, he did what he promised us he would do, and he has only just begun.
Only just begun. Now, if you are into history or politics or news junkie, it's just interesting to look at that and look at the younger Harris and look at the rise. But the point isn't simply that these two barrier-breaking figures have this connection across recent history, although they do. The point I'm sharing with you here as we end one of these, another busy week in American life and politics, is that Harris was actually engaging on the ground, early, in the field. And that means she has a deeper primary experiential knowledge and texture for what the Obama campaign was doing at the time. So she can try to pair the inspiration of a barrier-breaking candidate, because you don't just get people out in the cold for nothing, but she might pair that with actual years-long developed knowledge of the grassroots movement organizing that happened in that campaign, and something I've been telling you about long before Kamala Harris jumped in this race in this topsy-turvy year. Some of the more successful candidates these days, whether it's Harris, as we're seeing in the last 2 weeks, or AOC, who came out of nowhere to beat a member of the Democratic establishment, the third piece is something Obama also had: a pretty modern, open-minded posture towards American culture and the internet, which helped Obama leap past opponents before some of them even knew what was happening. Now, again, David Plouffe was as central to that organizing as Obama was to the vision, the messaging, the policy. And while the past doesn't repeat itself exactly, Harris actually is trying to do a lot more with less time than Obama 1.0. So it's not the same playbook, And if it were a playbook, you'd have to condense it down instead of whatever. 4 quarters of a football game, you'd have, I don't know, maybe the fourth quarter. But here we are in the first 2 weeks, and her supporters are, on some measures so far, doing exactly that. More, faster. Breaking fundraising records from Bernie to Obama. It's not a secret that time is short. It was part of the conversation that any Democrat with a pulse heard during the difficult debates over President Biden and whether he should stay or go. And President Obama has, by the way, returned the interest and the favor, if you will, to Kamala Harris. He has backed her at every step of her career, from San Francisco DA to the Democratic nomination.
A dear, dear friend of mine, so I want everybody to do right by her. San Francisco District Attorney Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris knows you've got to be fearless against the special interests. As Attorney General, Kamala fought the big banks that took advantage of homeowners across the country, and she won. As your senator, Kamala Harris will be a fearless fighter for the people of California every single day. And my friend, Kamala Harris, he's chosen an ideal partner who is more than prepared for the job.
Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
That's not nothing, especially not in Democratic politics, where the Obamas remain the most popular figures, and in a season where there's been so much talk about how this would go down and is it legitimate and how it'll all work out. When you have Barack Obama saying then on the way up and then at the VP level and then about, a week ago, hey, this is the one, well, that might help you rebuild the Obama coalition. You also need the voters. New voters, a record 142,000 of them registered in the first week of this Harris campaign, most under 35 years old. There's an uptick in voter registrations in some key states like Virginia, Massachusetts, and North Carolina, where Republicans recently took out ads. That's a state Democrats have only won once in the last 40 years by, guess who? Barack Obama. Now, as for that inner core that I mentioned, over 170,000 new volunteers are joining the campaign. That's different than just voters because they could be in any given state but do a lot of good work and help as far as the campaign's concerned. So that's where the young activists who might be in a state that's already fully red or blue and aren't going to swing their state might be key to raising money or traveling and helping this campaign, which has a lot to do in a hurry. So Harris has these multiple links to Obama, his approach, his movement organizing, as mentioned. And we checked the archives. Remember, when you take it all together, she's not new to this.
We are here because we understand that re-electing this great president is about us, it is about our children, it is about our grandparents, it is about our grandchildren, it is about our community, it is about our present, and it is about our future. It is about dealing with the fact that we need leadership at a national level who stays true to the courage of their conviction. The American dream belongs to all of us. And if we can work together and stand together and vote together on November 6th for President Barack Obama, that's a dream we will put within reach of all our people.
Sometimes the breaking news is about recent news, sometimes it's about recent history, and sometimes, if you're old enough to remember something from 15 or 20 years ago, it starts to feel like ancient history. Tonight is one of those nights. At the top level are these numbers, this Obama movement and energy, and the hires of people like David Plouffe. That's kind of the outer level. You go underneath as the video